This podcast has been brought to you today by standingtallnz.org.
Welcome to the Standing Tall NZ podcast, where we provide a safe space for bros, support people and communities affected by sexual violence. Each episode we delve into the journey of recovery, featuring insightful conversations with experts, advocates and those who have bravely faced their pasts. Our mission is to empower listeners by fostering resilience, promoting healing and raising awareness about the impact of sexual violence in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Join us as we stand tall together in support of recovery and change. By way of introduction, please give the listeners a brief introduction of who you are.
You go first. Hello, Sione.
Hello, I am Sione Finau, one of the volunteers at standingtallnz.org. Please forgive me, it's our second episode in.
Lots of practice.
Yes, a lot of practice needed. One of the volunteers, currently a student at AUT, studying a postgraduate diploma in mental health and addictions. Have aspirations in becoming an alcohol and drug practitioner.
For a Pacific whānau, a Māori whānau, or just in general, we have our swap roles in interviewing, but just for you personally, is it all over? Is it like the whole community, a specific community?
It's probably, I think the most, over-representation is Māori and Pacific, so it's pretty obvious that I'll be catering towards them. And plus, where we are under-resourced,
yes,
underfunded, and it makes sense to work with our Māori and Pacific. If we work with them, then we'll see less effects on wider communities.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Anyways, who are you?
What a great question. Who am I? What is existence?
Oh, no.
All right. So kia ora, my loyal listeners. I'm Dr. Alexander Stevens II. And if you haven't heard of me, a brief story is that I started off as a counsellor, specialised in dual diagnosis, which is mental health and addictions. Along the way, have received a number of sexual abuse disclosures from the age of 16 to now in my current 40s, and have and continue to support our bros. And by bros, it's often used maybe as victims or survivors. But we use the word bros because many of our men don't actually identify with those labels. Support people and community organisations affected by sexual violence in New Zealand. So I got my PhD back 2022 and decided that out of all the topics that you could specialise in, sexual violence recovery was going to be the thing that I'm probably going to do until I retire, and beyond.
Can we chat about your masters briefly?
If you want to.
Yeah, so I've read a bit of it, and your masters is what started your journey into the PhD, looking into, because it was initially to support Māori affected by sexual violence.
Yeah, initially.
Yep.
And then, but I think this is in context because where I live in South Auckland, we have a lot of Māori and Pacific crossover. So in Samoan, the word is awhakasi. We can use the word half-caste. Apparently, it's not the right word to use now.
No, not really.
It was in my day. You just were. Like back in South Auckland, we didn't really see ethnicity. We just played on the road.
Yeah.
Ran for our lives when the cars came down, but we didn't really know. And then, so for me, there's another word, I guess, which would be like mixed heritage. But half-caste to me doesn't seem offensive. Language changes, as you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, there were a lot of people that were, say, Māori Samoan, Māori Tongan, Māori Indian, Māori Filipino, plus all the other cultures that kind of crisscrossed over. And a lot of guys that I get, especially in South Auckland, have mixed heritage. So my master's thesis was really interested in understanding how do we create a framework to primarily support our bros who access services. And I looked at bringing 5 different frameworks together I'll send a link anyway for those that are just like, look, just get to the Wairua bit. But
Yeah.
you know, like, there's like five different frameworks together. So like Te Whare Tapa Whā, there was the medicine wheel, the wheel of change. There was also the recovery model, and then I also looked at frameworks like Whono Whale. And what I discussed in my master's work anyway was that frameworks like Te Whare Tapa Whā are not effective enough to deal with the complexities of sexual abuse. We actually need to draw on these other frameworks, and what would that look like? So I created a framework called Te Amarama. A really good example, actually, so I'm glad that you asked this question about framework. So in Te Whare Tapa Whā, it's often taught that there are these four elements. So there's Hinginaro, which is your mind, Tinana, which is the physical, Wairua, which is spiritual. Which one have we missed, brother? Oh, and whānau, which is family. But when it's taught, especially within a university or polytech level, and they talk about Wairua, often, especially if it's taught by tauiwi, that is to say non-Māori, Wairua is often said it's spirit, and when they look at how do we support the Wairua of a person, they'll often say something like, ask them if they want to do a karakia.
Yeah, this is my experience as well. Church was probably the explanation they've given
Right.
during my time in undergraduate, yeah.
Oh yes, actually, let's go back to you. So what were you taught then, so that we can see a lived
Oh,
example?
it was a short short class of in my sporting. So I did an undergraduate in sporting recreation,
Great call.
majoring in management, and in my first year, that's when the introduction of Te Whare Tapa Whā came in. It was very brief. It wasn't taught to me by a Māori from memory. And
Right.
on the topic of today's podcast is Wairua, and in that one it was brief, and it was Wairua is religion.
Right.
Wairua is spirituality,
Right.
and that was it. That was
Right.
none. And we were using Te Whare Tapa Whā to explain ourselves. So put in what you think your whatever characteristic is in Tinana.
Right. Or physical.
Or physical. In the context of sport and recreation.
Right.
Now, Wairua, I actually had no clue how to answer that one.
Interesting.
Now, how does that look in sport?
Yeah.
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 And it's for Pacific, it's church,
Yes.
and yeah, it's a very, I'm gonna say surface
Wow.
level.
And so, you know, and so that this kind of crosses over to my stuff. So then it's a matter of how does Wairua relate to, say, sport and rec? How does Wairua relate to sexual violence? I mean, when you talk about church, for example, in sport and rec, I was thinking, I guess Wairua could connect through fundraising. And that you're coming together for the spirit of supporting each other.
Yeah, no, it's a
But
difficult.
but can I say to you, Wairua is so much more than just a basic thing around religion or spirituality.
yeah.
And actually, the nature of Wairua, as I guess we'll discuss, is deep. It's deep, far deeper than what one podcast will give you. But certainly, I hope that will kind of engage you. And I guess if anything we took away for our practitioners, whether it's social workers, counsellors, nurses, occupational therapists, or even just people, is that Wairua is just more than a karakia, of which you tick the box when you're working with one of our bros.
That's what it kind of looks like. Back in my undergraduate,
It's so much more.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
much more, so.
On the topic of Wairua, what does the term mean in Māori culture?
Yeah.
And how is it significant to an individual's identity?
So there was some research done at the University of Otago, and I cannot remember his name at the top of my head. It'll come to me. Where it looked at what is Wairua, what is the nature of Wairua, and they interviewed a number of tohungas, they named, which is Māori healers, they named rongowa practitioners, so those are people that practice Māori ways of healing, and what they found was that the nature of Wairua has no clear definition. In fact, and I could get that, because actually the nature of Wairua would vary from individual to individual, iwi to iwi, across the country. One of the things with colonisation is that it's done a really good job to fracture how Māori practice their own spirituality and faith, and I'm talking pre-Christian arrival. However, given that, if I spoke generally, I would say that the nature of Wairua from a pre-Māori context comes from the divine spark, from our atua, or our gods that were then given to us.
Yeah.
As the short story, if you looked at it from our Māori pūrāka, our Māori stories, Wairua is a divine gift that was given from the Māori gods.
Yeah.
And when Māori were created, another way that I also think about Wairua, is that it's not by itself. It has what I call siblings like Maori, life force that gives it meaning. Wa or Va, if you're Samoan, for example, which is space and time. And so Wairua, Maori, and Wa kind of work in a collective partnership, creating, so if you thought of Wa, so it's time and space, creating moments of which Wairua can flow and connect with individuals and enhancing the Maori, the life force of a person.
I think, onto the topic of colonization.
Well, we're going to get there eventually. We might as well just do it now.
Yeah,
It's the sound of me opening a can of Pepsi, by the way. Don't think it's another can.
Because to someone who is not of Māori culture, and someone who's trying to understand, they probably won't get how you defined Wairua or how you explained Wairua. So what they did then was just put it to one word, spirituality.
Yeah.
And that's your explanation.
It's like aroha is so much more than just love.
Yeah.
So much more when you break it down. So let's do this briefly. So if you broke Wairua into two different words, W-A-I, is the Māori word for water. Rua is the Māori word for two. So Wairua can be seen, when brought together, as the space that connects two different worlds. That is to say, the living and the dead. Wairua could also be seen as the division, the two waters between two individuals, say between me and you, coming together into one va or one wa, which is what I was talking to you about, one space and time, enhancing the life force between us.
Shall we explain us and how we explained it in the last episode?
Yeah, I could just say to people, go back in the previous one. And
I guess that's an example of Wairua. If you
actually, you know what? So give a brief synopsis.
I mean, your ET graduation. Message you on LinkedIn. It was by random. We met.
Well, you think it was random?
Yes. Oh, you can say random, or you can say it was Wairua that brought us together.
Exactly.
And then after that, ever since we just worked in collaboration.
And actually, Wairua is a really good example of that. So, whenever someone says, "Look, I had a random thing happen today,"
a random epiphany, or something, like
or a weird thing.
Yeah.
I just say to people, take out random and weird and just put Wairua. You had a Wairua moment. I'll give you a quick example of Wairua. Wairua could be, or as you might be thinking about an individual and then you see them, or you hear news about them and you think, "Oh, that was weird. I was just thinking about them the other day." That could be seen as an example of Wairua, that your spirit reached out through space and time, just to ponder, reflect on another individual, and then you might have learned that person, I don't know, has moved to Australia, or they've passed away, or something anyway. Sometimes some of the guys that I work with talk about having dreams about people.
Yeah.
And in Wairua it might be what we call a tohu, or a sign of things. So, yeah, I guess as we'll start to kind of unwrap, Wairua isn't clear cut, but for the purposes of this podcast, I would say think of Wairua as a gift from the divine, given to us to connect as a collective. So when we talk about colonization, was really good at separation, which is then led on to that disruption in Wairua, and things like successive New Zealand governments putting things in place to stop Māori healers from practicing, like the tohunga, which is Māori healer, the Tohunga Suppression Act. You can see all these spiritual disruptions that started to occur, which has then created long-term ripples. It's very similar in Pacific communities, of which things like addictions, mental health, suicide, violence, all those things, we saw a huge influx.
It's quite interesting now. I was sitting in a presentation, a random presentation around one of the PhD well, she's already a doctor, I believe,
Right.
from UOA, came to AET and present her research around using Samoan indigenous medicine
Right.
and using it to heal people.
That was the
The pharmacology one, yeah. But
Yes.
so she's working in partnership with Samoa, and they found out that some of the old medicinal stuff in Samoa is helping
Yes.
communities.
Yes.
And now they're working with, is it tohungas?
Yes, tohungas.
Now they're currently working with tohungas to, explore much of the Māori
Rongoa.
around, rongoa. But doing it in a way where it respects culture. And it's like, it's
Yes.
interesting. They've eliminated the previous, what we called medication, and now
Yes.
bringing it back because you're realizing, oh,
Yes.
this stuff is actually helpful.
Yes, but then your
So,
mum comes
yeah.
from healers, doesn't she?
Oh yes, so she does that.
So what's the Tongan version of a tohunga?
I will get back to you on that.
Come on now, my Tongan representative. You
Oh
should
my
know
gosh.
this. You should know
I'm
this.
embarrassed.
But no, don't be. But I mean, so I guess what we're saying is, across Polynesia, and in fact, we know across the world, we have our own
Yep.
versions of healers that use local native plants to help their collectives become well.
Yep.
So that could also be seen as an example of Wairua. In fact, what would be the Tongan word?
Laumalie. But that's more, that's probably the closest word I could think
And
of.
it's hard, right? Because
Laumalie.
it's not a clear translation. But
Nah.
what would it kind of be in
Laumalie
English?
be spirituality.
Okay.
But we also have mafana. Now, in the literature and how they try to conceptualize mafana to tawiwi
Yes.
is in regards to performance and when a performer's performing, and then you get the audience jumping in, and that's
Right.
mafana because they feel the warmth to jump in
Right.
and participate.
Right.
And that's mafana. Now, that's probably another close term that could be
Right.
related to Wairua, but there's obviously clear
Yeah.
differences.
Yes.
But
Yes.
yeah,
Like Wairua, Maori, and Wa.
yeah,
So if you thought about that example, Maori might be the life force that they feel from others to participate in that Wa, that time and space.
yeah,
And I guess for me, so yes, this topic is about Wairua, but I've just realised we should actually also talk about Va and Wa in other podcasts.
yeah.
And Maori, because I don't think we do that sufficiently where we kind of interconnect them together. So
We'll get back to
good
the
example.
pod-
But it's a good example though of how this kind of stuff unfurls.
Yeah, I think there's more to the topic.
Yeah, totally,
Yeah,
totally.
but let's talk about traditional Māori practices.
Yes.
How do traditional Māori practices such as the haka or karanga express Wairua?
So if we go back just to the nature of connection, both seen and unseen, the haka was always seen as a wero or a challenge to others, but it was also to summon. So in many iwi across the country, when you were doing a haka, you would also summon the relative atua. So across New Zealand, there are different atua, different gods that play a significant part in tribal behaviour. One example is Tūmātauinga. So Tūmātauinga is known as one of the Māori gods, certainly up north. Now, in areas like Waikato, they also have their own, which features the rainbow. Kahukoro, I think, is his name. Which is also then different in Ngaitahu. So if you were going to do a haka, for example, you do a challenge, you would summon the deity or the god of war to throw it through to show those people, if we're going to do this, here it is. So you would summon the strength, the kaha, the ahi, and the wihi, the life force, the meaning, of your intention, before you would engage. And then what was the second part of your question, my friend?
The karanga. How does the karanga express?
Karanga is to literally just throw out a chant or a calling out to someone. But again, it's about what's your intention, what's your purpose. So in the marae setting, in terms of Wairua, there are different places where you settle different things, and first your tapu, which means that, you're sacred, so we have to lift the tapu off you before you come into the marae. So doing a karanga starts that process, so it's started by women, which then shows traditionally the place of equality within our male and female lines, that like our women had one element to do of Wairua and our men had another part to do. So it started with the karanga, and then you basically help into the passage of the marae. Then the men do a kōrero, which I suppose is their own version of a karanga, which then lifts the tapu, the sacredness of these people, so that everyone then becomes known as Noa, or normal.
This might be a silly question, but
Let's find out.
Wairua, is it applied the same to men and women, or is Wairua measured in different ways? Or
No. Wairua goes across equally across everyone.
Yeah.
And there are different things in place. So, for example, if you look at our women giving birth, so to me, our women hold status because they are literally the creators of life. Their whare tangata, their vagina literally holds that divine spark of tamariki. So when our tamariki are born, traditionally you would do different karakia to help the transition from one space into another. So there's lots of kōrero that talk about when babies cry, it is because they're being brought in from a state of safety, of being in the mother, into a state of te kore, or chaos, i.e. the natural world.
Yeah.
So the cry is the separation between mother and Wairua is to help transition that space to lessen the burden of being here. And then when we pass away, which will be many, 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 many years from now.
Yes, touch wood, yes.
Yes, touch wood. When people cry, it's the reverse. They're crying because they're mourning you from moving from this space and back into the original state that we were in. So that's when people feel that Wairua, that connection. And so the crying and the wailing and the things that we do is to help the Wairua of that person transition from this realm into another.
This kind of,
as an example,
makes me think about the Te Ao Marama framework and how each realm is connected through Wairua.
Yes.
And then it becomes its own realm at the end.
Well, because all things start in Wairua, all things end in Wairua.
Circle of life?
Yes. I mean, if you want to rip off good old Mufasa, then by all means. But it is a circle of life, because actually a circle makes sense in that it's cyclical, it's seasonal, and we know that you start in one space and you end in another. Matariki, which is the Māori New Year, starts in cyclicals in terms of astronomy. You know, so in Wairua, for example, there are moments, and this is the stuff you won't get taught in university, in Wairua there are moments where you are given opportunities and chance to maybe repeat history or change history.
Yeah.
And there are chances, I truly believe that there are moments where you will be tested, your kaha, your being, everything will get tested in Wairua to see how well you do. You know, and for me, that Wairua has an impact not only in its current form, but 7 generations from now.
Yep.
As a quick example, so if someone said, what's an example? So we know that the Māori land wars are a good example, or certainly from a government's perspective, what I call the Māori eradication plan.
Oof, yeah.
You know, Māori fought hard to keep their own dominion, to keep their own whenua, but that determination, or Wairua, you can see in Māori leaders 7 generations ago to now. I think it's one of the reasons why we still, fortunate might not be the right word, but I'm glad that we still have what we do have, because it had been passed on in Wairua. You know, like our Māori leaders, a vision to get ahead.
Yep.
Like Dame Whina Cooper, you know, when all our land was being confiscated, she said not one more acre.
Yep.
So that vision continues, you know, even now. Princess Tapoya, who's based in Waikato, is a good example. She told Waikato men to lay their arms down, because in Wairua she recognised that there was only one king.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the British king.
Yeah.
But also recognising that so many Māori had already died, that the Wairua, the divine spark, might not be passed on to future generations. So, you know, here are these beautiful wakine who have these thoughts of not only supporting iwi and hapori, which is community, but looking at how do we manaki and support the spark of Wairua to flow onto current day.
Wairua in relation to sexual violence recovery, so Te Ao Marama was the framework to support Māori Pacific affected by sexual violence. How can the understanding of Wairua contribute to the healing process for survivors of sexual violence?
And this is the bit I guess I always think about, because there's no clear definition of Wairua, and because our Māori and Pacific have different experiences of faith and religion, when I'm working with an individual client, I try my best to understand how do they understand spirituality or faith. Now, can I say this doesn't apply across the whole board, but for some of the bros who have been sexually abused, sometimes discussions around churches and faith can also be painful as well, because they might have experienced a lot of violence as well. Sometimes their dads or uncles might have actually been ministers, so they see these two things coming together and kind of disconnect themselves from what I would call Wairua. Additionally, I've also worked with many men who were sexually abused in churches or denominations. There's not one specific denomination, or denominations in New Zealand. We recently saw this with Dilworth
Yes.
as an example.
That's recent too.
Recent, yep. So I work with young boys as ages 15 all the way up to 70 plus. So those guys who had been sexually abused at Dilworth, they're now in their late 50s.
Wow.
However, when I think about the nature of Wairua, there's two things to think about, and this is something I was talking about in my PhD. I've come to realise that there's light Wairua and then there's dark Wairua. So Wairua in its pure sense, where it's clean, it's whole. If I think of it like water, so if we just go back to that word why and think of it as water, think of it as filtered in its true potential. Waikino means rough, unsteady, all over the place. And I've realised, because Māori tends to think in dualities and beyond, Waikino or Wairua is what I would call dark waters or dark spirit. And so when someone is raped, when someone is molested, when someone is interfered with as a child, or indeed as an adult, that dark Wairua unseen transfers from the offender through to that person, the bro, the victim, the survivor, whatever word you want to use to describe yourself.
Yeah.
That dark Waikino Wairua transfers through, and it causes all kinds of things to interfere and make that person unwell.
Yeah.
And so when I look at our bros who've been affected by mental health, drug and alcohol, who might be violent to other people, anger is a good example, that is Waikino Wairua, the dark Wairua that flows through that person.
Is this so this was new to me when I first read it. Well, is this known in Māori culture?
I'm sure it is. I just
okay.
haven't come across it academically.
Yeah, neither. So.
And because for many Wairua practitioners like myself, we're not exactly out about the fact that we do Wairua, because how do you
explain it?
Yeah. However, a lot of my bros that live in Arahui, Pōkeka and Ngarawahia, there's a thing where whenever they talk about me, I tend to ring them.
Yeah.
And sometimes say, who's talking about me? Which makes them laugh. But so Wairua, like I said, can be felt and experienced. And so I think for me moving forward, one of the things I will be talking about much more, certainly in academic journals within Māori and Indigenous, is this concept of Waikino Wairua. Because when we talk about Te Whare Tapawhā, we only talk about Wairua.
Yeah.
But like I said, there's dualities.
There's only one aspect that we're talking about, and then we're missing out. Which kind of, because Pacific and Māori worldviews are much more holistic.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
We're only seeing things in silos at the moment. So Wairua connects things is what I'm understanding.
And one of the things I've been wrestling with is actually Waikino Wairua does have its place.
it does have its place.
Yeah, it
so you're not
does.
saying we should remove the white column.
I'm saying that it exists,
Yeah.
right? And we are part of it, the circle of life kind of analogies, but we are interconnected, and actually everything has its place. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. So Wairua exists. Its complementary opposite is Waiken or Wairua, but actually in Waiken or Wairua, you can learn heaps about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do think that for a lot of the men that I work with, once we start to kind of pull a lot of that junk or ickiness out, then they can actually truly see the potential of who they are. One of the things I also said to them was, look, I wish it never happened to you, right?
Yeah.
But you have been interfered with. This Waiken or Wairua has been passed on through you. What do we have to do to filter it out? So that the way that I often try to show our bros, since it's really hard to discuss it, is if you imagine a glass of water, filtered water, it's see-through.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have any particles in it, right? And then if you imagine like a Coke or a Pepsi mix in another glass, if you could imagine that as being Waiken or Wairua,
Yeah.
when you imagine pouring that into a glass of water,
Yeah.
right, from being interfered with, that my job is to help work with you to then filter through all that stuff and try to return you back. It's, one of the questions I get asked is, will it ever be the same? And no, it won't, because once something is added, we can filter it, we can work towards removing
But
it.
it'll always be there.
On some small level, however, it's about how do we get you to work with what other things to find a way forward.
Living with the good and the bad.
Living with the good and
What
the
does
bad.
that look like in a cultural practice? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I've got mates who, in terms of their own Wairua, in terms of filtering out their stuff, I've got friends in Wairua who will go into the ocean first thing in the morning. This was down in the South Island.
Freezing.
Freezing, 5:30 in the morning in winter.
Oh my gosh.
Swimming around.
Wowzers.
They're Māori, so then you're not looking at great whites, you're looking at great browns, trying to...
I don't think there's any fishes around at that time.
but that's their version of connecting. And actually, Tongaroa was seen as an example of the living embodiment of Wairua.
Oh.
Because the sea gives, the sea takes.
Yeah.
The sea is the thing that connects Māori as well as our other Polynesian cousins together.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've got another whanaunga, another relative who lives in Rahoi Pōkeka, and Wairua and karakia or prayer is done in the Waikato River. So in both instances, you see this kind of connection with water or other spaces to help uplift the mamai, the things that they hold, to find a way forward.
It's quite interesting how you incorporate the environment as a form of Wairua recovery.
Yes.
But from like a different organization's perspective, it's a different intervention. But how do you incorporate your sort of teachings and therapy, like to support in a larger scale to those affected by sexual violence?
Let's talk about this a little bit. So environment is something like, so say for example, some of the bros that I work with have got drinking issues, have been drinking since the age of 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
Not everyone, some of them. So their environment has always been one of a drinking environment. So when they start to, and they've also been interfered with. So when they're looking at getting better, we've got two challenges on our hands amongst others. One is the drinking, the other is the sexual abuse, but both of them are sit within the realm of Waiken or Wairua, right? So what I often say to our bros is, if we can work on one element, if you thought of a tree, if we can work with the roots, everything else will kind of sort itself out.
Yeah.
So I've had bros who have stopped drinking in order to kind of work on their own personal trauma, being mindful of their triggers, being mindful of how they're responding as they're telling their stories. And Wairua might be implemented, say for example, if you thought of, like I said, we come back to the nature of water, think of Wairua as the thing that helps to flow things on. So Wa is the space and time which is now open in a therapeutic setting between us. Wairua is the invisible force that flows. So I encourage people to, do that verbal upchuck. That's what we discussed in the first podcast.
Yep.
And flow what's happening to you into that wairua, so that it can start to flow away from you, so that you're not having to hold it. And then Modi is life force, which is the other thing that wraps around that wire and wairua, so that you should start to feel better and better about the situation that you're in. I'm not saying that you're going to wake up one day and think, hallelujah, I'm back in the land of the living.
Yeah.
But what we do know is that time and space is a great healer. And when you team up in wairua with someone else that's prepared to help you, change can happen. And it can only happen sometimes when you have to shift out of the environment that you're in. So as an example, some of our bros might stop going to parties or stop going into garages where often drinking is held. Initially, their community might see them as being a little bit of a
boo,
boring.
Yeah. Changes. Who's this guy?
Yeah, exactly. It tries to pull them.
Yes.
It tries to pull them back in, right? Now, I like to think more often than not that they're trying to get them back in, but actually that's an example of that separation.
Yeah.
And people I know people that have been alcohol free now as a result of being affected by violence. Some of them are 1 year, actually 2 months is a recent example, a year, 10 plus years.
Wow.
So it is possible, but and all of it kind of takes in when they access their own wairua. Yeah.
Speaking of people, how do they play a role in nurturing wairua for people navigating their experience being affected by sexual violence?
And here's the thing, right? So it's not you just don't sit down with a person and say, I am going to do a karakia. We are now going to do a karakia.
Close your eyes.
Close your eyes. The karakia is now done. I mean, karakias are powerful when you actually apply them in their true form. Not just this is from a practitioner's perspective, not just sit down and take out a piece of card and read something and pray that you're actually pronouncing the words, but with words without meaning or intention are just letters on a paper. I mean, absolutely nothing. Sometimes, can I just say, wairua can be experienced when someone looks you in the eyes, you can actually see that they're genuine. In fact, a lot of the bros, when they're working with me, it's the first thing that they do is stare deep in my eyes to make sure.
Is that them testing you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
In wairua, how do I know that you're not an offender? How do I know that you're not going to hurt me in the same way that I've been hurt?
Yeah.
Sometimes men share very personal things with me and they look me right in my eyes to see how am I going to respond. But I know it's not a physical response. There's also a wairua bit there too.
Yeah.
And I know in that space, as an Indigenous practitioner, I have to hold two different realms: the wairua, the spiritual realm, and the tinana, or the physical realm. So as you know, Sione, because you experience it daily from me, there's times to jokey around.
Yes.
And then there's times where all jokes have to be put aside, because in that moment that person is showing you that raw wairua that's been interfered with and hurt. And in that moment, you have the ability to enhance their wairua, to connect with them, or completely damage and hurt them even more than what they had before they walked in to see you.
Yeah.
So, in our first podcast, we talked about support people, and one of the things I said is support people are absolutely vital in our bros' recovery, and this is why. Because if they've chosen or selected you to tell you something, then they obviously trust you.
All it takes is one person, and it's probably hard for them to find that one person.
Yes. But what we didn't really talk about in the last podcast is, I suspect a lot of that stuff also is in wairua. This moment, with Wa, this time and space has opened.
Yeah.
Wairua is now flowing. This person's thinking, I'm going to take a leap of faith. So we're talking about anything to do with faith. We're naturally going back to wairua anyway. We're going to take a leap of faith. We're going to tell this person.
And hope for the best.
And hope for the best, which is the Modi.
Yeah.
The life force.
And not many. I guess because the whole understanding of wairua is not the best understanding. And someone dealing with the disclosure may be, for support people, may be hard for them to work with.
Support people just think, oh, geez.
Yeah.
You just vomited that up. Now I've got to clean this up.
That's probably the worst response you could give.
Right.
Oh, no.
No. Yeah, but it happens.
Yeah.
But yet to that person, it's everything. This is now or never. And as you know, and often our bros give it 3 chances. Children, early 20s, late 30s, and then later on, before they're dying from something, that spiritual release.
Yeah.
So actually, like I said, believe it or not, if you do get a disclosure, if you're a support person and you're listening, if you do get a disclosure, and you might not think it, but actually consider it a gift that this person has been holding on to it probably for 20 plus years, sees your Wairua and thinks, actually, this is something that I could tell and get help with. And so you got the physical thing, so you're sitting down, you're discussing that, and then there's another thing of the invisible.
Yeah. You're basically having 2 conversations at one point.
Yes, that's quantum physics at the same time. So
we'll talk about physics and bloody Wairua another time, but go on.
Yeah, well, quantum physics is what you can see and not see at the same point in time.
Yeah.
And every choice that you make leads out to other choices, that leads out to other choices like branches. Wairua is the same thing. Every decision that you make flows on to other decisions.
Yeah.
A really good example, because sometimes people tell me that Wairua doesn't exist. Wairua is just as real as me looking at you right now. All the money that's currently in my bank account.
And the wish I had in mind.
But when someone walks in a room,
it's not random.
No, but if people love them, look around and see people's reactions. Because they're either got Wairua or a Waikino Wairua.
And that could be seen through appearance?
That could be seen through just someone walking in a room.
Yeah.
Tangis are good examples, or funerals are good examples of when certain people come back from the past. Some people look at them and think, oh, there's the black sheep of the family.
Okay.
Or here comes uncle or auntie, blah, blah, blah.
So there's a history attached.
Yeah, and that's an example of what I mean by what Wairua or a Waikino Wairua. And one of the things that then I think about is, did that Waikino Wairua start within themselves, or was it
passed from the previous
generation onwards?
Then that means Wairua is just as complex as say birth, for example, and then Wairua comes through your parents, through your parents' parents, and then ancestry becomes important. How you came here in this point in time.
There you go. I've got nothing more to teach you. I now set you free in the world.
Wait, let me go.
But that's a good example, though.
Yeah.
Wairua can also be attached. I mean, Wairua is everything. There are certain family names that come up in mind, where you just bring up certain family names and people roll their eyes.
I know this person.
Because of all the things that have happened.
I think in a Pacific example, the Dawn Raids. So Waikino, the negative Wairua.
Yep.
And then it affects families, and that's why they don't speak about their trauma.
Yes.
And then same thing with sexual violence.
Yes.
Because unfortunately they keep things to themselves.
Yes.
Probably they don't know how to deal with the disclosures. So coming into that positive Wairua.
But the Waikino Wairua has now resulted in where many Pacific families still don't trust services. Because with respect, there are some, not all, government services that continue to hurt our Pacific families and our Māori families. So Waikino Wairua, which is what I'm saying to you, there's a reason for it to exist, which is to also be used as a protective measure, but sometimes it can either protect our whānau from being hurt. When people pass that down and they say, don't.
Is that the Waikino
Wairua? Because you think, well, they've already been hurt, uncle blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Went to mow the lawns.
Or auntie.
Or auntie. Went to mow the lawns, and then a white van came along and took them. And that's how we've ended up with the lawnmower. But what have you learned, though? You've learned to not trust. So like I'm saying, there's a duality process that happens anyway.
So and even the Waikino water is not all bad.
It is, but you learn from it. He Tuhutene is, there is a sign in this. But this has taken me some time to kind of contemplate the nature of Wairua, which is why I want to do a second PhD in theology.
Wow, look at you.
Because a lot of our bros who have been affected in church, for example, or sexually abused or raped, want to have access with their Christian faith, but because it was so hurt and so violated by those men that were supposed to be known as, leaders, ministers, pastors, so on and so forth, they don't know how to have a meaningful relationship with Jesus Christ, with God, because of what had happened with those leaders who had corrupted their faith. And so what they're doing is that they're using our old Māori gods as a way of understanding the nature of Wairua to try to make a connection into their Christian faith.
Interesting.
So they're reverse engineering what had happened by my ancestors, like Samuel Marsden, who was the first missionary in this country. They're reverse engineering it to access.
It's quite interesting how people are going back to indigenous knowledge, like the pharmacology stuff, and now this, and it's we've been doing it right this whole time.
Yeah. And in fact, there was lots of conversation when missionaries arrived in New Zealand that there are a lot of similarities within faith. They even thought that Māori at one stage was the lost tribe of Zion.
Wow, that's new.
They got greatly diminished after they realised our resources and assets could be taken away, that perhaps we shouldn't be seen as such high status. But there's lots of kōrero about that. And here's the thing, is that even, people sometimes call our bros damaged. Even with the most damaged tāne, there's always a spark of divine that I can see. It's very, very rare that I don't see a spark that I can work with.
Yeah.
There's only one thing that really disrupts it, which is meth. Which is a whole different conversation, but methamphetamine to me seems to eat away at that person on lots of levels.
Drugs in general, or meth specifically?
Meth specifically.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Meth specifically, I've just seen. I mean, Wairua, like Modi and Mana, is indestructible, but my goodness, the psychological and physiological damage caused by meth in particular is so effective that it's hard for the Wairua to be housed.
Yeah.
So our tinana, our bodies, are the things that contain the Wairua. But if that's so significantly damaged, which is why we pass away, right, so that the Wairua is no longer contained within our vessel, it then goes back to the realm of the Atua, looking at it from a Māori perspective. Meth can be so damaging in terms of the brain, the mind, the organs, that it's hard for the Wairua to contain. So it kind of, I call it, like, slowly leaks out to the point where either people say they don't recognise themselves, or from working with whānau members as well, they'll say, like, I don't even know who this person is, they're like a shell. So when I hear that, what I'm hearing is that they can't see the divine spark of that person.
Is that a lost cause, or?
I don't think so, because I think if they're still alive, and there's something about Wairua that's still keeping them here.
Oh, okay. That's another way of looking at things.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that part of my framework in Te Marama looks at te kore, which is an opportunity.
How do you shift them from te kore to te kore?
And I just think in that moment, that person somewhere in there is still there.
Yeah.
But maybe not the wholeness of who they are.
So you can save some of them.
Yeah. Well, save is an interesting perspective, because I ain't no ihu karaite. Right? And neither are you.
No
Mr.
way.
Future practitioner. So we don't save people, but we assist them.
Yeah.
And I think this is the difference between us and our Pākehā and some of our Māori Pacific holidays. They go in there and think, yeah, we're going to save you.
Yeah.
People don't need saving.
They don't want to be saved.
Well, no, that's not our role. Our role is to manaaki.
Yeah.
To uplift their mana, to support them. Support and save are two different things. Unless you've got wounds in your hands and your feet, then by all means, you've got calluses from lifting weights, but
rowing really, but
I guess what I'm saying is, unless you're ihu karaite,
it's none of us.
Your role isn't to save. Your role is to literally support, to uplift, to strengthen, but never to save. But this has come from working in the field. Quick story, when I used to interview social workers or counsellors when I used to work at Manukau Institute of Technology, anytime someone would go, I want to be in this field because I want to save people, I'd be like, oh, no, X.
You're destined for burnout, because holy heck,
It's true. This is, in fact, let's briefly talk about burnout, So burnout for me is a good example of when Wairua is literally, it's flowing, but it's giving you warning signs. I literally think that Wairua gives you a heads up, hey, we're heading towards tricky territory now, for you and for other people. And if we don't look after ourselves, Wairua is going to kick in there, and it's going to say to you, hey, we're on the road to burnout, and if you don't do something,
Yeah.
we're going to end up in Waikino Wairua.
So Wairua has limitations then?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think, personally,
Yeah.
I don't think Wairua has limitations.
Maybe
I
our
think,
physical
I think our
bodies
tina now,
has
physical
limitations.
bodies has limitations.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you thought of Wairua as a divine gift, right, that divine gift and its wholeness has no limitations. Its limitations is in the vessel that it's in. Which brings me to a good point, for some of our bros finding a way forward. Fear of success can be scarier than fear of failure.
Wow.
So one of the things that I do say to our bros when we talk about Wairua is that even though you physically, some, not all, some of our bros just want to get the heck out of there and not come back, I say to people, when you're ready, allow the Wairua to guide you back. In terms of an analogy, stop fighting the Wairua that wants you to find a way forward.
Yeah.
This is where that AA prayer, the Serenity prayer, kind of comes in. Acknowledge that you only have control of a very small amount of things in your life.
Yeah.
And actually to surrender, which isn't the same as to give up, and it's not weakness, to surrender and say, actually, I do need help. To allow yourself an opportunity to meet with another person and say, actually, can you help me? These are big things that will help you find a way forward. And we just have to have faith that they will.
On to our final question.
Sure.
So we did a lot of storytelling and sharing of experiences. In what ways can storytelling and sharing experiences about Wairua aid in the recovery journey for those affected by sexual violence?
Yeah. When we look at the impact of colonisation, it really tried its best to utterly destroy and obliterate Māori.
And the history and the information.
And its history.
A lot of the stories,
and for people listening, they might think, well, give us an example. So, like loss of language, loss of practice, loss of land. 97% of our economic wealth was taken. Every time we tell stories, or pūrākau, and stories doesn't have to mean fiction, I'm talking non-fiction as well, has the ability to ensure that Wairua continues to flow and exist within this realm. And it also offers hope. And so if we look at stories across the world, Pandora's box, which is Greek mythology, looks at how hope was the last thing that left this box that contained all this darkness and all this evil. Hope actually exists across all society. It's incredibly powerful, and for me, it allows a space of divinity to be experienced between people. And in that divine spark of Wairua, I've seen huge changes in people. I suspect that's probably what keeps me in this role. I've seen men go in and out of courts, for example, who've been affected by the impact of sexual abuse. They haven't gone on to sexually abuse others, they've just got other issues like drink driving as an example, who've been able to face their fears and have really started to thrive. I think that when we talk about the pūrākau or the stories of Wairua, we're also sharing our knowledge for future generations. I mean, this podcast is a great example. Where we're getting people to kind of think about the nature of Wairua and how you interact with it, and how does your interactions affect with other people in your life. And also, what is your intention? We know that there are people that deliberately harm others, and then there are also people that have been harmed. So in Wairua, for me, it's about how do we find a way to, and especially using pūrākau or storytelling therapy, for example, how do we reshape those narratives so that we can find a way forward rather than keeping you trapped and locked in a vicious cycle, which continues to hurt and harm you, potentially hurt and harm you and those around you. So I guess if we had like key takeaway messages, it would be that, one, Wairua is just as real as you and I talking right now. Two, there's Wairua in its pure sense. And then you've got Waikino Wairua, which is the dark waters, the dark rough waters. Both of them coexist together. And that and that when we're being tested, when our character is being tested,
That's Wairua.
that's Wairua or Waiken or Wairua, and what are we going to do? You know, as a quick example, if I'm working with our bros to stop drinking and someone's being tested, will they open a can or not?
Yeah.
Right, so that's that choice between Wairua, Waiken or Wairua. And then I guess the third thing that also comes up is that Wairua and Waiken or Wairua have what I call siblings or cousins, which is Wa, time and space, Mauri, life force, which creates moments of where, like, you and I meet, for example,
Yeah.
and we either choose to work collectively together or we flow in and do our own thing. So I guess that's some of the takeaway messages that have come from this space.
And that'll do it for our standingtoolnz.org podcast. Thank you for listening, and please join us in our next episode.
Yeah, well, I think we'll talk about maybe mana, Mauri, and Wā in more detail.
Yeah.
Kia ora.
This podcast has been brought to you today by standingtoolnz.org.